little game known as Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. It's a game released in 1999 for the original PlayStation, and for the past decade or so, this game has taken the world of speedrunning by storm. Forbidden Memories was everywhere. It was practically impossible to avoid, even if you tried. It seemed like everyone had a friend who had tried running the game, and if not, you probably stumbled upon the game in a stream somewhere. It was like a plague that spread to all corners of the speedrunning community. It didn't matter if you were a PlayStation, Nintendo, or PC guy, Forbidden Memories had an allure to it. But what was it that drew people to the game and gave it such an infamous reputation? Today, I hope to answer this question as we dive into the story of Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories, Ultimate Roulette of Speedrunning. Speedruns Live, a place where many of my videos seem to start. A classic website used for finding streams related to speedrunning and racing your friends in your favorite games. As the legend goes, a speedrunner by the name of BJ was streaming Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories casually on their Twitch page.
Oh yeah.
BJ was most commonly associated with speedrunning Spyro games, and that's mainly what the runner SSBM Stuff, aka Saboom, followed him for. Saboom had played Forbidden Memories when he was a kid and was pleasantly surprised to see BJ streaming the game, as memories from his youth came rushing back, reminding him of how much he loved the game. The following day, BJ and Saboom, along with runner DSmon, would see who could beat the game's world tournament the fastest. This race took place all the way back in January of 2013, and is the first recorded race of the game on Speedruns Live. Looking at the player comments, it seemed like the guys had fun, and we could presume they were all together in a voice call on Skype, chatting it up. This was effectively the birth of the game, but eventually someone was going to be brave enough to race the full game, to take it just that one step further. And we only have to look 2 races above, where 5 players would attempt just that. And this paints an entirely different picture. A 12-hour completion, a 21-hour completion, and 3 forfeits. This was the first proper attempt at beating Forbidden Memories in a speedy setting. And out of the 5, Saboom's attempt would go on to be somewhat of an urban tale. As the story goes, Saboom's attempt was an absolute endurance test, spanning over 30 hours of continuous play before finally throwing in the towel from exhaustion. During this stream, 1,000 viewers witnessed the madness that was Forbidden Memories, and Saboom would also go on to get partnered due to the viewers he pulled. The 30-hour marathon of a stream is unfortunately lost to time, but many were inspired to give the game a whirl after watching him play it. And so, the seeds were planted, and the rest is history. But what happened during this race to cause such wildly different completion times between first and second? And why did 3 people forfeit? The answer is that this game is an absolute RNG nightmare. So let's talk about how to play it.
You know, the fact that
Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories
the fact that the series has fan games says a lot about how popular a game is, or any series is in general, if there's fan-made content of it. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to be playing at your Odyssey, but the reason I found out about the series is that I got recommended a trailer for the game one time, and I'm really curious to see if it's been released yet. Morbid curiosity, I suppose you could call it. I guess there's a better way to try finding out. Nope, that didn't help. Unless I somehow got the wrong series. It's only available for the PS5. It's a gacha game. Honestly, I don't know why I would be surprised about this. I'm surprised about the fact that I'm not surprised that it's a gacha game. I'm surprised it's exclusive to the PlayStation. Right, out of that rabbit hole I go, until I inevitably remember and get morbidly curious about it again.
The answer is that this game is an absolute RNG nightmare. So let's talk about how to play it. Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories does not play like your typical Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, but some core concepts still apply. If you're not familiar with any Yu-Gi-Oh! Whatsoever, don't worry, I'll explain the basics of dueling in this game. Let's take a look at a random duel played by the runner Matt 13 against Rex Raptor, one of the first opponents in the game. Every player begins by drawing 5 cards, where you can then begin to summon monsters onto the field. In Forbidden Memories, you can fuse together cards to make stronger monsters by selecting multiple from your hand, done by pressing up on the D-pad. On Matt's first turn, he sees that he has a plant and a female card, which makes Queen of Autumn Leaves with 1800 attack. Pretty decent stats for the early game. Rex then plays a card in defense position, as he has nothing strong enough to take down Matt's card. On Matt's second turn, he plays Armored Zombie at 1500 attack. His best option since there aren't any better fusions in his hand. On turn 3, Matt performs a common strategy known as tossing, also known as cycling to some. Matt selects Karibo and 8 Snake, but the 2 cards aren't fusible, so the game tosses Karibo out of the game. The sole purpose of this move is to dig for more useful stuff in the deck. Since you always draw until you have 5 cards in your hand, it can be beneficial to get rid of some trash cards that won't be of any use. In the following turns, Matt whittles away at Rex, until his health points reach 0. The duel. As Matt wins the duel, a couple of stats show at the end. The amount of star chips gained, form of currency we'll get into later, the card you obtained for winning the duel, and your overall rank for how well you did. Your rank is determined by a plethora of factors, such as speed, the amount of fusions, and a lot more. This plays into what card drops you fight. There are 3 separate so-called drop pools for each duelist in the game: SNA POW, SNA Tech, and BCD POW Tech. Whatever rank you get will acquire you a random card within that drop pool, although the cards don't all have the same chances of dropping. Going back to Matt's duel, where he got an S-POW on Rex, we can see that he got Ganigumo, which has a 17 in 2048 or 0.83% chance of dropping if you get an S or an A POW. So we know the basics of dueling, and we know a bit about how the card drops work. So now, let's get into why this game is an absolute RNG fest to speedrun. To begin, your starting deck is random. The 40 cards you get handed to you at the start of the game, well, it's pretty much out of your control, although there are a few cards that the game has to give you. For example, the game has to give you a removal card. There's a 50% chance that you'll get Raigeki, and 50% you'll get Dark Hole. Raigeki clears all monsters on the opponent's side of the field, whereas Dark Hole clears everything.
Easy enough.
So Raigeki is slightly preferred, although running with Dark Hole is fine if the rest of the deck is solid. You're also given a field card, where hopefully you'll start with either Mountain or Umi. These cards power up the main monster you'll be looking to fuse later on in this game. If you don't get this one, it's not too big of a deal. The real thing that runners will mostly reset the run over is the equip card. Equip cards are exceptionally difficult to obtain, so starting with a good one is a necessity. Out of the 28 equip cards that you can start with, only 5 are viable to continue the run, a 17.86% chance. These are Dark Energy, Beast Fangs, Horn of Light, Dragon Treasure, and Invigoration. If you don't get one, you're better off quitting onto the main menu, resetting the run, and trying for another deck. Then of course we have the monsters, which are a bit of an added bonus. Most runners don't reset if the monster cards are bad, but there are some types that are preferred early on, such as beasts or plants. If your starting deck contains any dragons or thunders, that's a huge bonus, because Forbidden Memories late game win condition is the almighty twin-headed Thunder Dragon. a strong, easily fusible monster at 2800 attack. The reason you need such specific equips and field cards in the starter deck is because those are the cards that work with Twin-Headed, all of them giving the monster 500 attack and defense each. Once you have your deck, the run begins by losing a scripted duel to High Shin, where afterwards you move on to face a bunch of opponents.
Do I still heal if I use
Rex
medic
Raptor is the
skills
first opponent in the tournament, and conveniently
for rally order
beat and
thingy?
drops a bunch of really good stuff. After beating Rex, you can back out to the title screen and enter free duel mode, where you can farm him for drops, which most runners usually do. Again, beating your opponent drops a measly one card, which is one of the reasons this game can take so long to complete. On some runs, you can sit there and farm Rex for 45 minutes without a single useful drop, whereas on a different run, you can potentially skip the Rex farm if your starting deck is insane enough.
Yes.
Rex can drop a handful of Rex Thunder Zombie save bound, such as Troll Dragon number 2, Dragon Zombie, Hostility Hero number 2, and
How much
Electric
damage
Snake
is that?
to name a few.
700.
But he also dropped Beast Fangs on BCD rings, useful on Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon. Once you're ready to move on from farming, you'll continue through the World Tournament, and the opponents go from pretty easy to decently challenging throughout. Since you don't really have that many Thunders and Dragons at this point in the game to fuse Twin-Headed, your strategy for getting through the World Tournament will usually rely on fusing beasts and females that hover around the 2000 attack mark. It's surprisingly addicting to learn all the different fusions and figure out what the best play each turn is. Although, sometimes a weird one-off fusion can occur that you weren't expecting.
What? What? That makes Cocoon of Evolution? What the? What? I forgot about that shit, dude. Yo, I fused a tiger axe and a dark fire dragon, and it made Cocoon of Evolution.
The first opponent after farming Rex is Weevil. He's easy enough. Then there's Bonnie, who's not too bad. Bandit Keith has a small chance to play Noah at 2600 attack, which can be a control, but otherwise he's pretty beatable. Next is Shoddy, who old school runners actually used to farm since he drops a few good Thunders and Dragons, but also Beast Fangs and Umi on BCD ranks. After that is Bakura, who can play Labyrinth Wall or Millennium Shield, both with 3000 defense, which can be annoying to get around. After that, it's Maximilian Pegasus, who at absolute worst can play Meteor Black Dragon, a 3500 attack monster which you have almost no chance of beating at this point in the run unless you draw Rengeki. Oh, the Curry Box is one of his more common plays at 2300 attack, tricky to get around too if you don't draw correctly. Pegasus can actually drop Megamorph, which is the best equipped card in the entire game, giving 1000 attack and defense to any monster as opposed to the usual 500 that the other equips give. The issue with getting this card is that you need an S or an A tech as your ranking from the fight, which is very complicated to achieve and takes a very long time. No. Even if you do it, Megamorph has a 64 and 24 chance of dropping, or 3.13%. It isn't always a waste though, and other really good things like dropping S or A tech Pegasus.
Holy mother of Jesus!
On Twin-Headed. Widespread Ruin, the best trap card in the entire game that kills an opponent when they attack, and Hamburger Recipe. You know, in case you wanted to summon Hungry Burger onto the field. Please don't be gamed. Please. Okay, God. Alright. Next is Ishtar, who has one of the absolute best drop pools in the entire game. I'm talking dragons with high drop rates, Dragon Treasure, Umi, Spike Zebra, who can be combined with a single Thunder to make Twin-Headed, and Widespread Ruin. She can be pretty annoying to duel though, with a rough 7.5 chance of starting the duel with a Black Skull Dragon at 3200 attack. Pretty much every run at this point will quit out to the free duel mode and farm Ishtar for hours once they've defeated her to improve their deck. She does have the downside of not dropping any Thunders, but that's where the star chips come in.
I don't remember setting that question mark there.
These can be spent in the password menu on the title screen. Runners usually spend their star chips on Thunders, as Dragons are generally easier to obtain through winning duels. After the Ishtar farm, you'll finish the World Tournament by facing off against Kaiba. Can also play Labyrinth Wall and Millennium Shield, but also Blue Eyes White Dragon. Not terrible to deal with, especially if you just farmed Ishtar for like 2 hours. At this point, you may have caught on to the fact that our opponents are starting to get pretty unfair, generally summoning monsters that outright beat twin-headed in a head-to-head. Cards like Blue Eyes White Dragon, Black Skull Dragon, and Meteor Black Dragon have way more attack power than twin-headed, and usually require an equip to beat, and in the case of MBD, 2 equips. If you think these cards are unfair, we're about to enter the part of the game where things get silly. There's 2 paths runners can take from here on out to finish the game. You can choose the Final 7 route or the Final 6 route. The Final 7 route has you fight all of the low and high mages from each shrine, ocean, desert, mountain, forest, and meadow, to then move on to face the Final 7. In the Final 6 route, you take a detour to fight Labyrinth Mage and Seto second, before finishing the mages. This knocks the amount of fights you have to commit during the game from 7 down to 6. Some people prefer this way because all of the fights at the end of the game are done in a row. If you lose just one fight, even the very last one, you have to redo them all. It's absurdly punishing, and we'll talk more about it later in the video. It should be mentioned that the Final 6 route isn't necessarily easier by any means. Labyrinth Mage is the first opponent in the game who has everybody's favorite.
Well, that does a lot of damage too, so whatever.
Guardian, a 3750 attack monster that absolutely annihilates unless you draw Regeki, Dark Hole, Widespread, or 2 equips with a twin head. If you're used to the rules of the official trading card game, it's just so insane to see this guy just put a card with this high attack straight up raw onto the battlefield. Seto second is super unforgiving too. He can play Gate Guardian, MBD, Metal Zoa, Lackluster Soldier, Blue Eyes White Dragon, and a fuck ton of other things too. If you beat them both, then cool, you don't have to fight Labyrinth Mage later during the final gauntlet. To unlock the mages, you must visit the Pharaoh's Palace to duel Mage Soldier, a laughably easy opponent at this point in the game. But drop-wise, he does have a 2048 or 2.44% chance of dropping Dark Energy, an equip that works for twin-headed. After beating him, the mages are now unlocked, and you can tackle them in any order you want. The low and high mages of each shrine do need to be
is all about that kind of shit after all.
Compared to the high ones. The ocean and desert shrines are the 2 easiest out of the 5, with the only problem being a few strong monsters that high
Have I
ocean
beaten these guys yet?
instead of getting a field buff from Ruby being the default.
I think I'm not strong enough
High
still.
Mountain Mage has a low chance of playing MPD or Black Skull Dragon on turn 1. Absolutely devastating cards. The mountain field buff you begin on, turning them into
I can
4K
take care of a lot of things when we start going through the end game.
Absolutely
Bullcrap.
ridiculous duel at times. His best card is Perfectly Ultimate Great Bond, a monster with 4K attack with the help of Forest, which the duel starts with from the beginning. Take a look at this clip from my first run of the game that I did on my Twitch stream the other week. What is it, the bot from Silent Hill? Oh my god. Come on. Play a magic. Play a magic. You idiot. No! Attack with the moth! Yes! Come on!
Sure.
What is it? Not another moth. No! Would you believe me if I told you that he actually played a 3rd moth that duel? Yeah, seriously, the duels just get ludicrously difficult at this point in the game. And we're not even at the end yet. Lastly, for the mages is the Meadow Shrine, and High Meadow Mage can play good old Gate Guardian. We're used to it at this point, I guess. But not with Sogan on the field. Seriously, 4,250 attack points. How in God's name are you supposed to get past this shit? The only thing you can really hope for is Regeki, Widespread, or perhaps a lucky Easy Mode, as it's called. Easy Mode is a catch-all tournament for Forbidden Memories, where the opponent will begin by playing a relatively weak monster on their first turn, which gives you a good chance of winning the duel, since they'll continue to play monsters with equal or lower attack if you clear their monster on turn 1. With enough luck, you'll make it past the mages, and now you can either choose to go straight to the final gauntlet, or farm some more to improve the deck. You could go back to Ishtar for more dragons, Widespread, Dragon Treasure, or Nkumi. If you have a trap card in your possession, you can Atex on Pegasus for Megamorph or other good stuff. Or you could farm Low Meadow Mage for the rare 0.98% chance at an MD drop.
It seems this area
and an MBD drop.
Yeah, well, it can be a bit
What? What? MBD! What? My first device doesn't do the. Oh, there we go, baby. Let's go. Yeah. Girl, I have an incredible luck.
MBD and Megamorph severely increase your chances at beating the final gauntlet, but you have to get lucky to get the cards, and it is by no means a guaranteed win for the end game. The final gauntlet in Forbidden Memories is, without a doubt, one of the hardest boss sequences in gaming. The difficulty here is legendary status. If you played this as a kid back in the day, there's almost no way you'd be able to beat it unless you knew about Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon and what equips to use. When speedrunning the game, you go into these bosses with the bare minimum cards, hoping that you draw correctly and hoping that the opponents give you easy mode. So how bad can it get? Let's go over the duels. In the case of Final 7, Duel 1 is Labyrinth Mage. Strongest card, Age Guardian, 3750 attack. Duel 2, Sebek. Strongest card, Zoa, 3100 attack with Yami Field Buff. Duel 3,
Alright, Sharpshooter is definitely worth it now.
3150 attack with Yami Field Buff. Duel 4, Aishin. Strongest card, Age Guardian, 3750 attack. Duel 5, Seto 3rd. Strongest card, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, 4500 attack. Duel 6, Dark Knight. Strongest card, MBD, 3500 attack. And Duel 7, Nightmare. Strongest card, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, 4500 attack again. It goes without saying that this part of the game is unnecessarily difficult. The worst fight of them all has to be Seto 3rd, who has a 55% chance of beginning the duel with a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. If you somehow manage to take it down with widespread or removals, we'll just play another one. Yeah, he has 3 of them. Instant death. It's basically nothing you can do to get past it, with 90% of the decks you'll have during a speedrun. Aishin is also super annoying, because his chance of playing Gate Guardian turn 1 is stupidly common. And because his monster is so strong, you only have so many turns to dig for equips, a removal, or MBD if you have one. If you give him control of the board, he often plays Megamorph onto a strong monster, to the point where they exceed 4000 attack, and it becomes near unwinnable from there. Alright. Don't play it.
Oh! We have another Gate Guardian? This is insane! What is he top deck right now?
Nightmare is pretty scary too, because like with Seto, he can also play Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. The chances aren't as high as on Seto, but it's beyond infuriating spending 20 minutes to get to the fight, only to get slapped in the face with an ultimate turn 1. Besides ultimate, Nightmare also has Gate Guardian, MBD, and Moth in its deck. It's a brutal last fight. Aishin, Seto, and Dark Knight also have access to incredibly devastating magic and trap cards, such as Widespread Ruin, Reverse Trap, Raigeki, Shadow Spell, and Megamorph. Oh, also, the AI literally cheats from Aishin onwards. If you play a card face down, the AI is programmed to know which card it is. They can literally see through it. Not only that, on Aishin onwards, you might see a 5-card hand visually, but these goons have 20 cards in their hand. I'm dead serious. All of this is happening while you're listening to some of the most stressful music imaginable. Forbidden Memories does not fuck around.
No way! No! I just got Exodia!
To get past the final gauntlet, you just need one lucky run. One attempt where everything lines up. And because that almost never happens, having splits that look like this is common. Just finishing the game is an accomplishment. The RNG is that bad. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, and some players have tried to defy the odds. How far can you push this game if you just have a little bit of luck on your side? Let's take a look at the players who have tried and succeeded. The first big world record that I remember when I first started watching Forbidden Memories was Monopoly Man's 538.24, set back in March of 2013. A really nice run with 11 dragons, 7 thunders, 1 widespread, and 3 equips. Monopoly Man got 2 of his equips from farming Mage Soldier. Not a bad strat for the time, but one that isn't really common anymore, since drop rates are better understood now. His run also featured a first try Final 7, which is extremely uncommon to get even to this day. Many players would attempt to beat Monopoly Man's run in the coming months, and at this time, it was a thrilling time to be a spectator of Forbidden Memories. Since the game mostly centered itself around luck, practically anyone could be the next record holder. Given you understand the basics of the game, you just have to get lucky enough, and who knows where good RNG might take you. It was like the Wild West, where anyone who was doing races on speedruns live could snag the record at any moment. Saboom would get very close with a 549.45, but the record wouldn't fall until June 2013, where 2 Brazilian players would lower it by a ton. The Urnator with 453.18, and our Copad with 418.58. Yeah, not often you see world records being beaten by over half an hour. The record would continue to fall with GFC getting a 406.16, Colin 7 with 4 flat 56, and the Urnator again with 329.27, set in May of 2014. This record sort of marked the end of an era where, if you wanted the record now, you had to Hail Mary the final gauntlet once you started running out of time for farming, and then hope you miraculously beat the game. The lower the record falls, the less time future runs have to farm for useful cards you'll need against people like Haishin and Seto. The world record would never see a big drastic improvement until the player Kanik would get the world's first sub-3 hour completion at 253.08. This time is still listed as the world record today on speedrun.com, but Forbidden Memories has a big scene over in Japan as well, with their own leaderboards showcasing times that are faster than most have done in the West. The current record being a 245.32 by the player Onion? Okay. Onion's starting deck was pretty textbook when it comes to the kind of deck you're looking for, with 1 Dragon, 1 Thunder, Raigeki, and Horn of Light. His Rex and Ishtar farms were extremely lucky. Out of the first 3 duels on Rex, 1 drop was Crawling Dragon number 2, and the other Dragon Zombie. On Ishtar, Onion gets a Dragon Treasure on his second duel, a 1.56% chance. If that wasn't enough, he then gets another one just 15 minutes later. Having 3 equips by the 1 hour 20 mark is not only very rare, but also ridiculously fast. He then farms until he has 55 starships to buy in Umi, then heads towards the end game. On the mages, Onion's luck continues to pile on, as he gets through them all without losing a single game, including easy modes on High Mountain Mage, High Forest Mage, and High Meadow Mage. On Final 7, Onion makes it through the first 3 fights swiftly, but finds himself against 2 Gate Guardians on High Shin. He has Umi out and is in desperate need of drawing an equip with the components for his head. Lady Luck is on his side, and he draws exactly that, then proceeds to win the duel. Against Seto, Onion draws Umi and an equip on his first turn. If he draws a dragon, he's able to beat any card Seto has except for Ultimate. When you're in a situation like this, you just gotta pray that he doesn't play it. The blessing was granted, and Seto played Gate Guardian. Onion was able to draw his dragon 2 turns later, and was now past the most difficult fight in the game. The string of good RNG would continue, as Dark Knight played a trap on turn 1 instead of a monster. Dark Knight has 4 traps, where 2 of them are practically useless and impossible to trigger. Which, guess what, is exactly what he played here. Now, it's the very last fight. This is where you realize that this is all or nothing. The stars either align right here, or you get sent back 20 minutes to the beginning of Final 7, and miss your shot at the world record. What was Nightmare gonna play this time? Ultimate. That's it, I guess. I can't do that. At least, I don't think so. The lottery ticket. Raigeki. The only card that can get you out of this position. The perfect draw at the perfect time. With 2 ultimate dragons staring him dead in the face, Onion strikes them with thunder and prays he goes easy from here on out. Nightmare's gimmick is that he only plays monsters. He does not have any spells or trap cards which could buy you time to stall. Onion has to hope for an incredible downgrade in attack power. He only has 3,500 life points left, So it's a game of hoping that Nightmare does not play a third Ultimate, Gate Guardian, MBD, or Moth. He has to hope that in that 20-card hand, not a single one is any of those 4 monsters. The chances are astronomically low. But on this fateful day, it really happened. And the rest is history. Black Skull, baby. It's in the bag. And that, my friends, is how lucky you need to get a world record in this game. And to end it all, get the sweetest victory sound imaginable. And also the credits. Sometimes, when you least expect it, you'll make it through the final gauntlet. Sometimes it's with a deck you never even thought could do it. It's really difficult to convey just how luck-based this game is and how difficult it is to achieve the record, let alone just finishing the game. I've been playing this game a bit on my Twitch stream lately, twitch.tv/therixer, and people always ask me what the run length of the game is, and I can never give a straight answer. My first run miraculously beat the game in under 8 hours, an incredibly good time for a first completion, but my third run of the game legitimately took me 19 hours. Even with the best deck I've ever had, featuring 14 dragons, 9 thunders, 3 equips, a widespread, an Umi, and an MBD as the cherry on top. Final 6 actually took me over 10 hours to beat, and that's not even that uncommon to see. If we return to the Speedruns Live race results page, it's just hilarious to see the amount of forfeits present here. Sometimes, you just have to surrender. The game can absolutely break your soul, giving you easy modes all the way through the final gauntlet, but then take it away from you by the end. The game is so unpredictable in its runtime that an 80% run has never been showcased at a PSA or Games Done Quick despite the game's popularity. Although, after PSA 2016 had concluded, there was an alleged bonus stream with a Forbidden Memories run performed by Mergy with no surviving video. The run apparently went on for 12 hours without finishing. Classic. The Forbidden Memories craze even spread to some bigger names in the scene at the time. The game is just a certified clip generator. The most absurd stuff just seems to happen all the time. And sometimes, you'll get a beat drop every now and then.
Oh shit, I gotta talk. I must be because my cock me right now, so I'm doing walkaway strats on Necro again. I love alcohol.
I don't know, it's your
Trent! Go! Let's go, dude! Save! Save!
Forbidden Memories still has a sizable cult following today. A lot of people speedrun card mods of the game, where you get more cards than just one from beating an opponent. It does make the drops a bit less significant, but it's far more forgiving when it comes to the time you spend on the run as a whole. Forbidden Memories also has a ton of fan-made ROM hacks that seek the goal of continuing to expand the Forbidden Memories world, and keep the fusion system that made the game so memorable. The people just wanted more FM, so the fans got to work. Even today in 2022 though, vanilla Yu-Gi-Oh! FM speedrunning still has a loyal fan base. People still race the game from time to time, and world record attempts are being streamed on Twitch fairly regularly. Runners Tagger Player and Matt13 have both had runs well on pace to beat Onion's record, but something always goes wrong during the final gauntlet. But my money's on these two players to improve the record, or perhaps any of the top Japanese players. It's difficult to know how active their scene really is with the language barrier and most of them streaming on Nico Video instead of Twitch. It would be silly of me to have a channel dedicated to PlayStation speedrunning lore and not talk about Forbidden Memories. It's a game that's gone down in history as one of the biggest RNG fests in all of speedrunning. Some people cannot fathom why you would ever run a game like this where nothing is in your control. On the other hand, though, you can just sit back and relax, knowing that wherever the game takes you, you're just kind of along for the ride.
I'm sitting here in a tuxedo, eating a salad out of the bag, bro.
Forbidden Memories is random enough where every playthrough of the game is different, and some players love that about the game. I run games like Ratchet & Clank and Mirror's Edge, both games with extraordinarily high skill ceilings with its depthful movement. And to be honest, it's kinda nice to not have to worry about how well you play all the time. That isn't to say that YYY is just play twin-headed and win lol. In the early game, you do need to know a ton of different fusions that you'll mostly learn through trial and error. There is a ton of knowledge you need to know when it comes to attaining certain ranks on specific duelists. There's things like Guardian Stars, drop percentages, memorizing password codes, remembering what cards the opponent can play, and so on. RNG is often despised in speedrunning, but without it, games are more likely to reach their final destination. Our journey through speedrunning is lowering the games that we love in a collaborative effort, but we never stop to think about what happens when we reach the end, when a time simply becomes maxed. Forbidden Memories, having as much RNG as it does, effectively ensures that the game's record history is never ending. You can always get a better starting deck. You can always get better draws. And you can always get luckier on the final gauntlet. To end this piece, may the RNG gods smile upon future speedruns of this frustrating, absurd, yet amazing roulette wheel game. Thanks for watching. If you like the content, please consider subscribing and supporting me on Patreon. Take care, and have a good one.
Nice one. Mara?
Flowers in SpongeBob are in every single episode, but we're never told what they really are. In this video, I'll be going over 4 different theories which speculate about the existence of the flowers. Watch till the end, because these flowers are not at all what you think. The first theory on the list suggests that what we see in the sky are really boat propellers. At first, this may seem like a stretch, but it sort of makes sense. For starters, each flower resembles how a fin and a propeller would look like. Also, in episodes like Karen's Virus and the Sponge Out of Water, the flowers appear to be solid objects. In the episode SB129, Squidward travels to both the future and the past. When he goes to the past, the flowers are not in the sky. This theory is true. This would explain why, since boats didn't exist back then. Also, in the episode Hooky, we see many fishing hooks in Bikini Bottom. If all the flowers were boat propellers, it would explain why there were so many hooks and why they're there in the first place. But boat propellers don't look like these, do they? Each flower appears distorted, and every flower has a different color. This could easily be explained by the light refracting the propellers and bending the shapes as a result. Its colors could also be explained as algae or sunlight reflecting like a prism. This theory does not come without flaws, one being that they don't spin. If they were boat propellers, they would spin like these, right? Also, in certain episodes, the character gets close to the flowers and they still look the way they do normally. As interesting as this theory was, I think there are better answers. One being the next theory. This one links up with another popular conspiracy, the Bikini Atoll theory. Bikini Atoll is a real place in the Marshall Islands. This place was used by the US to test many nuclear explosives.
This guy has an obsession with putting sound effects.
The name Bikini Atoll resembles the name Bikini Bottom,
Quite proven.
which is where the characters in SpongeBob live. It's believed that Bikini Bottom is in fact Bikini Atoll. Bombs mostly affected the water in Bikini Atoll, since most bombs were not dropped on the island, leaving the water radiated. I think it's fair to assume that the fish were also radiated, and when living creatures get radiated, they mutate. In this case, the fish became as advanced as us. This is where the flowers come in. Bombs also brought with them a lot of oil spills. As we know, oil is less dense than water, so naturally floats to the surface, just like the flowers do. This is a fascinating theory, but the points I mentioned before contradict it. For example, I mentioned that the flowers appear to be solid objects, unlike oil, which is a liquid. Also, in the episode SB129, the episode in which Squidward goes to the past, we don't see the oil, which is strange since the fish already seem to sort of evolve. So far, we have met 2 interesting theories, but it only gets crazier. The next theory is not fan-made, since Nickelodeon themselves created it. This theory implies that the flowers are underwater clouds. This all started in the episode Pressure. In this episode, Sandy and SpongeBob are lying down and admiring the sky. SpongeBob comments on the flowers and refers to them as clouds. At first, I thought this must be what we're looking for, since it's mentioned in the show. Now that I've thought about it, I don't really think so. As we know, clouds aren't solid, unlike the flowers in the sky, and the clouds aren't in SB129, which doesn't make much sense. Besides this, in a particular episode, SpongeBob befriends a storm cloud. This cloud looks how a normal cloud would, and not at all flower-shaped. Also, we see flowers in Squidward's and SpongeBob's yard.
Another arrow trap, amazing.
This fact alone could disprove this, and all
Okay,
other
so all
theories
of
I
the
found,
2...
except for one. I'm confident that the answer we're looking for is the final theory. Flowers and SpongeBob don't really play a massive role in the episodes. They're just there, except for a few moments which caught my eye. One being the episode, West of the West. This episode features a Wild West era in Bikini Bottom. In the end of the episode, SpongeBob and Pecos Patrick sing the song Idiot Friends, but they don't sing alone. A few flowers join them. You heard that correctly. The flowers sang with them. But that's not all. They also move independently, episode plain to see. This can mean one thing and one thing only. The flowers are alive. Which would explain why one of them fell when hit by a boat. What about the flowers in Squidward's yard? I don't have a definite answer, but I think that there are different breeds of these flowers, just like there are blue and green ones. There are little and bigger ones. I mentioned that the flowers aren't in the episode SB129, but neither were the fish. I think that the flowers hadn't evolved yet. Maybe they just didn't live there. The flowers in Bikini Bottom are what add life and provide all of us with that feeling of nostalgia. Even if they are alive, oil spills or propellers, or even just clouds, this doesn't change that. Before you leave, drop a comment.
Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is one of those shows that always has me scratching my head. Ever since I started my YouTube channel, I've been bombarded with comments about how 5Ds is the best of all Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. Now there's not even a close second. I just couldn't get over the zany concept of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards being played with while riding on motorcycles. Can you really blame me? I started with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, which took us from a rich guy's island, castle, ancient Egypt. Then Yu-Gi-Oh! GX came along and put all of our duelists in school, and now they're racing each other on motorcycles. Even as a kid, I thought this was the goofiest thing ever. It's a real shame too, because I've always believed that the cards to come from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds were nothing short of amazing. To this day, the Signer Dragons are among my favorite to collect. And while Ghost Rare cards were technically introduced during the GX era, it wasn't until the introduction of Synchro Monsters with 5Ds that they truly hit their stride. And even though a large portion of these monsters were Dragon type, I never grew tired of them because the designs were incredibly creative. The character designs were also really cool, and I also liked the setting. I just couldn't wrap my head around those pesky motorcycles. Now here's the part where I tell you that I finally watched Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and I was pleasantly surprised. But is it the best of all Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime? We'll delve deeper into that later on. First, I need to set some ground rules. In this video, my focus will be on the Japanese version of the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds anime. I never got around to watching the English version, so I can't comment on the extent of the differences. But considering it was 4Kids handling the English dub, I can only imagine that there are some variations. There's also the important fact that the last season of 5Ds never even received an English dub. And since we're discussing the Japanese version, you can expect to hear different names for some of the characters, cards, locations, and really anything else. And one last thing before we continue, do yourself a favor by subscribing to this YouTube channel. Trust me, you won't regret it. When I reflect on the golden days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, and even the less exciting times of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, it's pretty obvious that friendship was the driving force behind many of the characters. The 5 pieces of Exodia symbolize the unity of Yugi's friend group. Yes, I'm counting Yami as the 5th person, and this unity is what led to victory over Kaiba, which not only gave Yugi his grandpa back, but also put an end to Kaiba's evil behavior. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, when Manjome loses to Judai, he stops looking down on people, eventually becomes friends with Judai, then he almost beats Judai when they finally rematch. Loses on purpose for reasons I won't get into right now, so technically he was gonna win, but you get the point. Friendship is power in Yu-Gi-Oh! There are countless examples of this in every series, but 5Ds takes a slightly different approach. Friendship is certainly a major factor in the series, but it's almost like they flipped the script. Instead of using the protagonist to guide others through kindness and the joy of playing games, the story begins as a cautionary tale. The opening scene of the first episode, we're introduced to Jack Adams as he enters a packed stadium to defend his title, King of D-Wheelers, which is essentially the king of games in this world. As Jack defeats his opponent, we cut to a scene of a cheering crowd. Fans watching on a big screen from outside the stadium, and a city collectively celebrating Jack's victory. Then we jump to Satellite District, a rundown wasteland where no cheers can be heard. This is where we meet our protagonist, Yusei Fudo. We discover that Jack is from Satellite District, and the two of them are very good friends. At least they were, until one day Jack stole Yusei's D-Wheel along with a certain card of his before fleeing the district. Then the next time Yusei saw Jack, he was being crowned the King of D-Wheels, and he did so using the stolen items. For a while, the first arc feels like a revenge story where the protagonist desperately tries to take back what was rightfully his. I can't stress enough how different this character dynamic is from the typical Yu-Gi-Oh! Rivalry. While people often draw parallels between Jack and Kaiba since they're both rival characters in their respective series, Jack's character bears a closer resemblance to Joey Wheelan, albeit with a dark twist. Imagine if the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters concluded with Joey becoming envious of Yugi. After witnessing the power of Exodia and his own helplessness in saving his sister's eyesight, he then pilfers the 5 pieces of Exodia along with Yugi's entry items for Duelist Kingdom. Then he makes his way to the island alone, and once there he is able to defeat Pegasus and become the king of games. Now Yugi must overcome Joey in order to rescue his grandpa and even the score. I know that sounds absurd considering their close friendship, but much like Joey and Yugi, Jack and Yusei were very close friends. Everything changed when Jack saw an opportunity to escape satellites to realize his dream. While it is hard to pin 5Ds as a revenge story, it certainly has one of the better depictions of it in the realm of anime. When Yusei gets his card back and finally defeats Jack, there's no celebration, no sense of joy, or even a sigh of relief. Instead, Yusei's victory only serves to divide them further. Before the climactic face-off in the city, we see Jack waiting with bated breath for their reunion, as if he knew that his past actions would catch up to him and couldn't wait to settle the score. But when Jack is defeated decisively, the rivalry is completely shattered. His competitive spirit crumbles, and since he was defeated on the world stage by a nobody from Satellite District, his title of king has been replaced with fraud. Even when Jack offers his reasons for betraying Yusei, it does him no favors. If anything, it makes Jack look even worse, because it confirms that he was only acting in self-interest. Consequently, Jack suffers from a crisis of identity, while Yusei's deep-seated trust issues continue to linger. It's not until much later, when the two are forced to team up, that they're finally able to begin the process of rebuilding their fractured bond. This level of nuance isn't limited to just Jack and Yusei. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is full of complex characters with unique circumstances that ultimately draw them together. Let's revisit that divide between Satellite District and Neo Domino City that I touched on earlier. When I mentioned that nobody cheers for Jack in Satellite, it's because Satellite's residents are regarded as scum, treated as second-class citizens by those in the city. But, of course, 5Ds isn't content with such simple distinctions. Even within the city, there's a hierarchy. Certain groups of people enduring worse treatment than others. Take Aki, for example. She's the daughter of a prominent politician, which should land her at the top of the social hierarchy. However, she has a unique power, the ability to materialize duel monsters and employ their effects beyond the confines of the game. After her powers manifest, she's packed off to a boarding school because she can't control them. Her situation swiftly worsens when she gets there, leading her to flee the school. Along the way, she encounters a man named Divine, who is the founder of Arcadia Movement, a secret organization that initially seems like a sanctuary for psychics. But, as it often goes, things aren't so simple. Arcadia Movement is, in reality, a military organization with the aim of creating an army of psychics to overthrow Neo Domino City. The organization's leader intends to exact revenge on the rest of civilization for the mistreatment of his people. And just like that, a girl born into affluence, who should have had every advantage, finds herself ensnared by a terrorist organization. From being on top of the world with a loving family, to alone and afraid. Turned into a living tool for a homicidal maniac, simply because he offered her a semblance of love when no one else would. Fortunately for Aki, at some point, Divine goes missing, and Arcadia movement crumbles practically overnight. Shortly after, Aki is informed of Arcadia's crimes, and initially denies any involvement, but eventually she admits that she was aware of what was happening, yet chose to turn a blind eye, because Divine made her feel loved when no one else did. To atone for her association with Arcadia movement, Aki joins forces with Yusei and Jack to protect those who once repudiated her due to her psychic curse. And even though all of Satellite's residents are viewed equally as low-life scum by those in the city, there are various different factions within the district that are constantly at odds with each other. First, we need to understand how the divide occurred in the first place. About 17 years prior to the events of the first episode, an underground reactor called Moment, which provides power to the city, malfunctioned and exploded. This caused the ground beneath the city to rupture, dividing Neo Domino City into two parts. One, which we still refer to as the city, the other, a much smaller part, became known as Satellite District. Although they are technically still one city, the only remaining connection is a pipeline through which the city sends trash to the district to be compacted and processed by its residents. Sometime after the separation, the city began sending criminals to Satellite District as a new form of punishment, where they were forced to work in the factories. Along with the criminals came a new police force to keep them in check, and as the criminal population grew, the district gained a reputation as a prison camp of sorts. But given that the separation occurred only 17 years ago, there are still many decent people who live in the district, either by chance having been there when the malfunction occurred, or by birth in the time since. Unfortunately, this fact is lost on the police hailing from the city, which, as we are well aware, harbors a distorted perception of the district, resulting in the police treating everyone under their watch as criminal scum. The tyranny from the criminals and the city police, who initially were supposed to protect the civilians from the criminals, led to the formation of several gangs, most of which would simply fight over territory that ultimately did not belong to them, but some had more noble causes. Interestingly enough, Yusei and Jack were once part of one of these groups, but I'll talk more about that later in the video. When Yusei becomes king of games, the government assigns a police escort to watch over him when he travels. The guy in charge of protecting him is Ushio, the same officer who patrolled Yusei's part of the district. He's also the same guy from Chapter 1 of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, but that's a whole other thing. Much like all the other police officers from Neo Domino City, Ushio harbors a deep disdain for the people of Satellite, seemingly deriving pleasure from acts of oppression. But when Yusei pays a visit to his old foster home, Ushio is forced to tag along and he starts to open up. Despite initially wanting no part of it, as he can't stand being around what he perceives as scum, things take a turn when Ushio discovers that one of the foster children aspires to be a police officer. This revelation is mind-blowing for Ushio, as even in the city, the police are often met with hatred and fear, yet this foster child in Satellite District views him as a real-life superhero. From this point onward, Ushio starts to see Satellite's residents in a different light, to the extent that he even risks his own life to protect them, for the first time ever realizing his role as a purveyor of justice. Now, I know 5Ds isn't the first anime to tackle heavy themes like vengeance, classism, breaking the cycle of hatred, and I could certainly name some anime that do it even better. But it was quite the shock to see Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all anime, and especially the one with motorcycles, tackle these weighty subjects and manage to earn my appreciation while doing so. Discussing topics like these in the context of a franchise primarily designed to sell trading cards is a challenging task, and can easily devolve into pretentiousness. We crossed. But 5Ds pulled it off surprisingly well. Now let's shift our focus to one of the more underrated aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. Symbolism, particularly as it pertains to the monster cards. As I mentioned in the introduction of this video, I've always been a fan of the cards, long before I finally made the decision to watch the anime. But what truly stands out about the cards is how they are employed in the show, and I'm not talking about that. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D stands as the only anime where the cards themselves serve as a reflection of character development. There were hints of this in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, particularly with Exodia, but the cards in the original series had fairly straightforward meanings. Pegasus, for example, used toon monsters because of his love for cartoons and his eccentric personality. Mako, a fisherman, utilized the legendary fisher. Rex Raptor used dinosaur cards, and you get the idea. But 5Ds took this concept to the next level with the Signer Dragons, which is basically just an umbrella term for the signature cards used by the main characters. Let's start with Black Rose Dragon. The design is based on roses, which are generally considered to be harmless, yet they also have thorns, making them prickly, capable of causing harm if approached carelessly. This symbolism, obviously, is intended to reflect Aki's personality, but the effect of the monster is also very telling. When this card is summoned, you can destroy all cards on the field, self included. Black Rose's self-destructive effect mirrors Aki's own psychic powers, which can be equally as destructive to herself as they are to her surroundings. Yusei's monster, Stardust Dragon, doesn't tell us much about the user at a glance. If anything, it reminds me of Frieza's third form in Dragon Ball. But the effect of the card highlights a key trait of Yusei's character. You tribute this card to negate the activation of a card or effect that destroys a card or cards on the field. Simply put, Stardust Dragon can be sacrificed in order to protect other cards from being destroyed. Throughout the anime, Yusei consistently assumes the burdens of others, occasionally at the risk of his own life. The first episode, a boy named Raleigh presents Yusei with an upgrade for his D-wheel motorcycle. Yusei discovers that it was stolen. He willingly accepts the blame for the crime. In another instance, when Yusei's old friend Crow tries to join Yusei in his battle with Dark Signers, Yusei instructs him to stay out of it. Later in the arc, during a life-or-death duel forced upon Yusei and Raleigh, Yusei tries to lose intentionally. His readiness to extend himself for the sake of others is prevalent, and the effect of his signature card is emblematic of this trait. But everything changes when an old friend